Sa kaginhawahan o alinlangan, may alagang maaasahan ang bawat
15 na ba?
15 na ba? 15 na ba? 15 na! Shopee! 15! Sa Shopee! Tara mag-Shopee! Shopee Payday sa 15! Shopee Payday sa 15! Shopee Payday sa 15! Sulit ang sweldo kada 15! Shopee Payday Sale! Shop na! Shopee!
Number 16.
Siguro iniisip ng marami, ibang-iba na ako.
Morning, everyone. In 5 minutes, we will start the PCSC 2021. Okay? It's 9 o'clock in my watch. Mayong buntag sa tanan. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to each and every one of you for being here with us today. I'm Randy, and welcome to the Philippine Computing Science Congress, or better known as PCSC 2021. Before we start, just some gentle reminders in attending online meetings like this for a more meaningful and productive meeting. So let me start with some provisions of RA 10173, or better known as the Data Privacy Act of 2012. So please be informed that as participants of this online activity, that you agree and consent the Computing Society of the Philippines to collect, use, and disclose personal informations such as full name, email addresses, the name of the institution, including pictures which shall be used by CSP for reporting and documentation purposes only. And then some basic online etiquette for this online meeting. We would ask you to mute yourself, meaning you have to mute your mic by tapping the mic icon. Although we can also set all the participants muted at the beginning of the meeting, as well as control it while the meeting is ongoing. And make sure that you have your complete name in the meeting room. No, it should have a complete name that appears in the meeting room, because this will be our basis later in the issuance of certificates. Now, if you have a good internet connection, we would encourage you to turn your video on. However, if connection is a challenge, you may turn your video off. And then if you want to say something later, you can use the raise hand option and wait for the moderator to acknowledge you so you can be unmuted. You can also use the chat box, but make sure it's clear. Your message is clear and that there are no typo errors in the messages, because everyone can see it and it will no longer be deleted. And then please talk audibly, no? So when speaking, please do it slowly, clear, volume, and close to your microphone. And we would like to seek your cooperations in completing to do the 2 days activity. Attendance matters to us. As Ched would love to say, we start as one, we end as one, and we learn as one. So, okay, let us start this Congress with the opening prayer and the singing of the national anthem.
Sikoy ko kamighimo tolangit. Sikoy ko kamighimo taaldo ay bulan. Ikaw ang nagbuhat sa kabituunan. Ikaw ang nagbuhat sa kalibutan.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم فقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم آمين يا رب العالمين الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين آمين اللهم اجمع شمل المسلمين والكريستيان واللومد في مدينة دباو وسلم دائما مجتمعنا هذا بالسلم والأمن والتقدم في بلدنا هذا آمين يا رب العالمين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار وصلى الله على خير خلقه سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين آمين يا رب العالمين.
In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Our most gracious Heavenly Father, we come to you today to praise and worship you and give you thanks for all the things you continue to provide for ourselves and our families. Father, we humbly ask for forgiveness for all the times we have offended you, when we forget to acknowledge your presence in the image of our brothers and sisters, and for moments we fail to be good stewards of the blessings you have given us. Continue to guide and protect each one of us, Lord, that we may always walk in the lights of your everlasting love and mercy. Grant us, Father, with your comfort in times of distress and with your strength in times of weakness. Bestow upon us your unending grace and healing, that we may in turn become instruments of gentleness and compassion to others. We ask all this in the name of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, with a prayer and the intercession of our Blessed Mother. Amen.
Manama, mawantog ka. Warpo ko iling ko'y ko. O Diyos, kahibulungan ka. Busa ikaw lang ang simbahon ko. Busa ikaw lang ang alagaran ko.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Ay hinatang tula, kawit sa pagkayang minamahal.
Dr. Rachel Edita O. Rojas, the CSP president, will now deliver her opening welcome remarks. Dr. Rachel, please.
Thank you, Randy. A pleasant good morning to everyone. And welcome to the Philippine Computing Science Congress 2021. On behalf of the Computing Society of the Philippines, the distinguished members of the board, the chairs of our special interest group, and our co-host, the Department of Computer Science, UP Diliman, we'd like to welcome everyone. The Computing Science of the Philippines is the professional organization of computing researchers and educators in the Philippines. And our mission is recognizing the importance of scientific culture among the Filipino people. The CSP shall encourage and promote the advancement of computing science and technology. And every year we host the PCSC, and we organize it to enable local and neighboring computing educators, researchers, and ICT professionals and students to interact and share their work in computing, computing science, computational science, informations, and communications technology. And for this year, we are so privileged to have invited speakers. And on behalf of the organizers, I would like to express our thanks to our invited speakers, and they will be properly introduced later. And of course, thank you to ang aking punong abala. No? Thank you so much to our Congress Chair, Dr. Randy Gamboa, for the hard work. Our local organizer, headed by Dr. Jimmy Caro, and of course, our program committee who have reviewed our papers. Thank you for the leadership of our co-chairs. We welcome, of course, our participants, our paper and poster presenters. Congratulations. And thank you for contributing your time, talents, and treasures towards the success of this event. And we are happy that we have representation from various places and institutions. Please allow me to share with you this report from the World Economic Forum 2020, which reports on the jobs post-pandemic. It is important that we know the contents of this report so that we are aware and we know how to prepare ourselves, our students, our respective institutions and professional organizations, and of course, our country. According to the report of the World Economic Forum, and I quote, by 2025, 97 million new roles may emerge that are more adapted to the new division of labor between humans, machines, and algorithms. Roles already growing in demand include data analysts and scientists, AI and machine learning specialists, and robotics engineers. The jobs of tomorrow also show the continuing importance of human interaction through roles in marketing, sales, and content production. So you will notice in this report the emphasis on data analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning on one hand, and on the other hand, of course, the soft skills of communication and human interaction. So it's very, very important that we read and look at this report and see the details. One of the charts that was presented in the report is the job landscape that they provided, that by 2025, and I quote, new jobs will emerge and others will be displaced by a shift in the division of labor between humans and machines. Okay, note The growing job demand. One, almost all, if not all, are related to computing. So you have chosen a very important career and field at this time related to computing and computing science, information technology, information science. One, data analyst and scientist, AI and machine learning specialist, big data specialist, digital marketing, process automation specialist. No, I think the one that is a little bit different is the number 6. Number 7, digital transformation specialist, information security analyst, software applications developer, and Internet of Things specialist. So it's important that we know and are aware of this, and I encourage everyone to look at the details of this report. So I encourage everyone to look and see the details and transform our organizations and prepare. Let's prepare for the future. So with that, I end my opening remarks, and I hope we have a very fruitful engagement as we have this PCSC 2021. Thank you and good day.
Daghang kaayong salamat, Ma'am Rachel. In the program, I'm supposed to give the rationale as well as the overview of the Congress. So, to our invited speakers, no, as mentioned by Ma'am Rachel earlier, they will be properly introduced later. To my fellow CSP board members, paper and posters presentation, ladies and gentlemen, mayong buntag usab, no? Year 2020 has been a roller coaster ride for all of us. And we experienced battling this pandemic. And I am glad that all of us are up and running to do our best. And hopefully, no, it's about to end and looking forward for a better year. This is our first online Congress. This actually saves us travel costs as well as time. And what's more important to us now is to protect the health of Congress attendees and presenters. And we always plan to incorporate remote virtual presenters as there is a concern increase over the spread of the virus in our country. So allow me now to give the overview of the Congress. However, let me just reiterate and introduce again CSP. No, as I noticed in the CSP, many are actually newbies. As mentioned by Doc Rachel earlier, the Computing Society of the Philippines, or better known as CSP, is a national society of computing science researchers, educators, industry practitioners, government policymakers, as well as students. CSP is an organization promoting research and development in computing science, computer science, computer engineering, computational science, information, and communication technology education. Of course, other related disciplines by promoting the exchange of knowledge in these fields, especially at the tertiary and graduate levels. This year, CSP invites individuals to submit papers and participate in the 21st Philippine Computing Science Congress, or the PCSC 2021. The CSP organizes this Congress to enable local and neighboring computing educators, researchers, ICT professionals, and students to interact and to share their work in computing, computer science, computer engineering, computational science, and information and communication technology education. As mentioned by Ma'am Rachel earlier, this year's Congress features special lectures by prominent and distinguished researchers and educators, in the field of information and communication technology. For this year, we have 5 plenary talks. This morning, we will hear the talks of Dr. Jomar F. Rabahante of the University of the Philippines, Los Baños. He will talk on the features of numerical simulation in the Philippines. Dr. Angeline Lau of the La Salle University will talk on network topology, analysis, and modeling abstract. And Dr. Christopher P. Monterola of the Asian Institute of Management, who will share on case studies of data science as applied in industry and government agencies in the Philippines. This will be followed by the CSP meeting to be presided, of course, by our CSP president. This afternoon, Jimmy and myself will be sharing about international quality assurance. This will be followed by the first batch of oral presentation. The second batch will be in the morning of the second day. In the afternoon of the second day will be the poster presentation, and this will be followed by the closing ceremony and, of course, the awarding of the best paper. I know this is not going to be easy. I know and understand expectations and realities. And I know this is not going to be a walk in the park. It's not going to be an instant thing. However, I'm still praying and hoping that it's not putting the cart before the horses. We need full and unconditional support to realize this very first PCSC virtual presentation. So I wish you a fruitful and successful Congress. Mayong buntag usab sa tanan. So at this point, may I now ask Doc Rafi to take over for some announcement about the election, as well as the referendum, and to moderate the 3 plenary talks this morning. Take it away, Rafi.
Hi, Doc Randy. Thank you. And good morning to everyone. As Doc Randy mentioned, we will have an election and the referendum during the PCSC. So more details about the election will be done later on, but we just want you to know that as members, you will be able to vote and nominate and vote for the next set of board members for CSP. Without any further ado, let us switch over to the different invited speakers for this morning. We are privileged to have the presence of 3 distinguished researchers and scientists this morning in PCSC. To start off our day, we have Professor Jomar Bahante. Dr. Jomar is a familiar face in Main Street and social media today, as he is one of the known experts in the country modeling COVID-19 pandemic. His research, together with the UPLB Biomathematics Research Team, is considered by policymakers in crafting national policies to battle COVID-19. Dr. Rabahante is the youngest professor at the Institute of Mathematical Sciences and Physics, College of Arts and Sciences in UPLB. He obtained his Doctor of Science in Mathematical and Systems Engineering degree from Shizuoka University, Japan, and he also received numerous distinctions for his high-impact research outputs, both locally and abroad, including the title UP Scientist 1 in 2017 and the Young Scientist Award by the National Academy of Science and Technology in 2016. May I let us welcome Dr. Professor Jomar Bahante, who will be talking about futures of numerical simulations in the Philippines.
Okay, magandang umaga sa atin lahat. Good morning. I'll just share my screen.
Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Magandang umaga po ulit. Okay. Kita po ba yung slideshow?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Oops.
Wait lang po, naka-automatic po yata. Print full screen na lang. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about to you today is about futures of numerical simulation in the Philippines. My specialization is in applied mathematics, and I'm doing numerical simulations for complex systems, specifically for biological and biosocial systems. And what I'm going to share to you today is not really that technical, but more on perspectives, more on possible ideas. And my aim also today is somehow to motivate how our field in numerical simulation, and of course including computational science, to move forward here in our country. Okay, the title says futures because later on I'm going to somehow emphasize that possible futures are plural. Okay, it's plural. It's not singular. There are many possible futures, and it's somehow it's kind of dangerous to just think that future is singular. I mean, possible future is singular, and we know we need to be prepared for different plausible futures that we might face in the next 10 or 15 or 20 years. So first, for those people here who are not familiar with numerical simulation is somehow doing calculations in our computer using algorithms, using computer programs to implement mathematical models. And these mathematical models can be physical, social, or biological. And usually these systems are complex in the sense that it's better to understand or investigate them not just at the individual level, but it's very important to investigate them at the systems level so that we can see somehow the emergence of patterns, to see how the interaction among the actors can provide certain patterns that could affect the whole community. Okay, and also usually these complex systems are affected by feedback loops and they are nonlinear. Okay, so the bottom line here is we usually do complex systems numerical simulations if somehow it's not really that easy to analyze them by hand. Okay, and now we know in our era of fourth industrial revolution, there are many things that we need to investigate, and these systems are complex, like public health, interaction of human and animals, plant systems, biomedicine, businesses. If we're going to look at geophysical systems, so they are complex, and we need to do somehow a different kind of modeling that usually cannot be done by just pen and paper. Okay. So the outline of my talk will be, I'm going to share to you some of the research ideas that might be interesting for us here in the Philippines, and research ideas that somehow I believe can be at the forefront, or if not at the forefront, at the frontier of numerical simulation. And also these research ideas could also transcend not just research, but also at the educational level, and also at the policy and human side level of numerical simulation. So let's go first to the basic one, the theories in theoretical. Most of the numerical simulation research now, the trend is very heavy on statistical computing, which includes, of course, data science, things that that involves finding patterns, finding trends in data. So I think most of us here watching this conference are very familiar about the topics in statistical computing. This also involves machine learning tools like neural networks, improving the precision of these machine learning tools, etc. So this is one of the area where we can do research in terms of numerical simulation. The second one, I believe that we can somehow do research is in optimization. Optimization has been here in the Philippines since I believe 1970s, 80s. You know, operations research, management science. These areas is already been here in the Philippines for a long time, but still there are things that can be done in optimization. Specifically, if you want to optimize dynamic systems like optimal control, and if you want to optimize systems that are not regular, they exhibit patterns that somehow non-convex or somehow cannot be easily computed using the usual mathematical programming tools like linear programming. So this is one way to do research. And of course, in control theory, that's also another area where we can do further research, because previously, of course, control theory has been applied in engineering, but now, of course, in the early 1990s, 80s, 90s, it was also been applied in economics, but now control theory is being applied in biology and in other areas of biomedicine. And one of the areas that I love most is computational geometry. I believe in this area, we can do further research, specifically because, as you can see in theories, no, most people study algebra, computational algebra. Of course, if we want to solve matrices, decomposition, finding roots that are very difficult to find, you know. So computational algebra has already been there. Calculus, very, very much well studied. So we usually, in mathematics, there are many people studying analysis or calculus, but there are very few people who are working in computational geometry. And there are lots of areas in computational geometry where we can do research. Of course, computational geometry has a huge intersection with algebra, because we can use the language of algebra in studying geometric structures. But here, it's very nice to study computational geometry, because we know we can look at problems in a different perspective. For example, if we want to solve dynamical systems, usually we use, or if we want to investigate dynamical systems, we usually use, of course, it's based on calculus, right? But we usually investigate them using algebra, matrices. But we can somehow put geometric interpretation on these matrices or on these dynamical systems, and somehow our idea or our perspective can have, you know, have different point of view where we can innovate or get novel insights. So somehow computational geometry can be a lens where we can look at problems in a different perspective. So for example, in finding roots, definitely in, of course, we know in algebra, right? If we want to find roots and we want to teach that to our kids, usually we either we start first with Cartesian plane and we have a curve, and these curves intersect with the x-axis, then those can be the roots. And that's geometric, right? But in our high school or college, sometimes we do away with that geometric interpretation and we just use, you know, the usual solvers, like for quadratic equation, we use quadratic formula, or completing the squares, etc. So it's very algebraic. Or if we want to solve systems of equation, we just use matrices. So it's very algebraic. But we know we can go back always to the geometric interpretation, and we can have a different perspective. And I believe Angeline Lau will also discuss some topological structures later that might be useful for, I don't know yet her presentation, no, but we know there are many topological or geometric tools that can be used to solve biological dynamical systems. Okay, so this is one area where I love most because I love geometry. Okay, so this one way where we can do theoretical research. Now, after doing theoretical research, we can go to another kind of research where I believe we can move forward and be at the forefront of numerical simulation research. First, in the applied side of research, we can do research in implementing or applying the methods in numerical simulation to huge systems. Sometimes when we teach students in our universities, we just use very simple systems, right? And then that could be the exercises of students. But in reality, or in real world systems, usually the systems are not very small. Usually they are huge. Although we need to find balance. We need to frame first our problem, because if our problem can be solved by using a simple system, why not? But if we really want to include more factors, more actors, more perspective where we think these areas can really affect the dynamics of the system, then we need to do more research on this level. How we can apply or implement numerical simulation tools for very huge systems. Okay, and in addition to having huge system, one area where we can do more research is including the black swan or the uncertainties. What is a black swan? Usually when we look at systems, we usually interpret them using central tendencies, right? Like mean or median. But it's very dangerous actually to just represent a system by using averages. Usually, those out at the tail of the distribution, of the probability distribution, can be the catastrophic or the factor that can have more impact in the system. For example, earthquakes. Of course, if you look at the average, how many earthquakes we have in a year, or siguro gaano yung ano man tawag doon, yung shake, okay, yung intensity, we see that every day siguro almost near zero or mababa lang yung shaking ng earth, okay, or ng ano natin, ng lupa. So if you're going to compute the probability distribution, probably may higit siya nung almost zero na intensity. But we know the most event na may impact will be yung mataas yung intensity, and that could be catastrophic to a society. And usually that's a black swan. That's a that cannot be just represented by an average. And also in biology, in epidemics, there are many cases where super spreaders are not in the average level of the society. Hindi sila yung ordinary people interacting, but they can be the hubs of the network, of the social network. So we need to include the black swans. The black swan came from the phenomenon where usually swans are white. So sometimes people will just conclude all swans are white, but we know there could be a black swan, a rare species where that swan is black. So we need to always include in our simulation these individuals or these actors that can have huge impact in our society, but their presence could be rare or not in the average. And in addition to that, we always need to include uncertainties. Mostly when we do numerical simulation, we use deterministic and very certain algorithms. It's not bad, but we always need to look at the robustness of our system. How robust our system against random noise. And random noise is also another issue. Random noise is always not normal. There are many random noise that could be over dispersed or following a fat tail distribution. So these are the things that we need to might be considered in research for the applied side. And of course, there could be many applications specifically for physics like fluid dynamics, fluid mechanics, engineering, biology, epidemics, chemistry, first in finding drug-drug interaction, gene-protein interaction, etc. Operations research for businesses, for logistics, etc. So still, these fields, although sa operations research, may kita natin, that might be oversaturated na because there's a certain era in mathematics or applied mathematics na panay operations research ang nag-aaral. But still, currently, there are huge, wide array of areas na pwede pa rin ma-applyan ng numerical simulation. New ways to apply numerical simulation. And another one is for the applied side to consider numerical simulation not just in human computer, because we usually just look at human computer interaction, but now it's very important to include human computer and environment interaction. Okay? And currently, if we're going to talk about Internet of Things, if we're going to talk about smart agriculture, smart cities, this is not just human computer interaction, it's human computer environment interaction. And this is one way where we can move forward in research in the Philippines. Specifically, Philippines, medyo kulang pa tayo sa gantong outputs, sa gantong direction in our research. Another one is user innovation and personalized products. In MIT, user innovation is one of the themes in their research. User innovation is like creating products where yung innovation comes from the users. And when I studied in Japan, napakaraming parang products na inisip ko, paano nila naisip yon? For example, di ba, if you go to 7-Eleven, bibili ka ng, let's say, hotdog in a bun. And then sa Philippines, yung 7-Eleven, meron kang sauce. And that sauce ay nasa sachet. Di ba parang hirap, kakagatin mo pa kung di mo mabuksan, at saka mo lalagay. But in Japan, they have this kind of very simple technology na nandun siya sa isang package na pipindutin mo lang, lalabas na yung sauce. And that's, parang sabihin ko, very simple but very innovative. And I believe that came from sa users. Kasi di ba, as users, marami tayong parang kahit simple, pero parang iniisip natin hindi ganun ka-comfortable for us. For example, shower. Di ba, pag mag-mix ka ng, ng hot and cold sa shower, parang hirap. Minsan ang hirap mag-mix. But in Japan or in other areas, meron na sila mismong temperature control sa labas. And then, i-control mo lang doon, let's say 30 degrees, then yun na yung temperature na lalabas. So, these kinds of hindi tayo comfortable as users can be a way for us to innovate. Okay? And maraming ganyan sa buhay natin. Kahit sa bahay, tingnan nyo, ano yung mga areas sa bahay natin that we think na uncomfortable tayo, but we think we can innovate more. And of course, personalized products. Sa medicine, usually ang mga drugs like for cancer, hindi siya pare-parehas across all among cancer patients. Dapat personalized medicine ang gagamitin. So these are the areas where we can do more research in the Philippines. And of course, lastly, hindi ko na kailangan explain ito, numerical simulations, of course, including data analytics and AI, can be applied to have a resilient and smart cities. In the Philippines, dito pa lang punong-puno na yung research areas natin kasi alam natin maraming lugar sa Philippines that are not resilient and not that smart yet. Okay, so marami tayong pwedeng gawin sa Philippines. And another area where we can do research, and not just for research, also for education and also for for policy making yung social side. We usually, in our practice, ang lagi lang natin iniisip, we always just think theory and application. But it's very important to have another dimension, which is yung what we are doing can transcend outside our usual box of area. Kung ang area natin computational science, we can do beyond this traditional discipline natin. First, ethics. And as in the National Research Council of the Philippines, I'm part of the governing board. We are already somehow thinking to have some ethical standards or code or whatever, or a guide specific for applied math or numerical simulation. Okay, and later I'm going to expound on this. Okay, this is a very difficult area, but this is one way where we can move forward. Ethics. Another one, inclusivity. How we can give access to many Filipinos, not just in terms of equipment, but also in terms of knowledge, in terms of information. How those people in the areas not part of the urban cities can also get the benefits of numerical simulations. Diversity. Mostly when we do research, parang unified lang, no? Kung sino yung leader mo, research leader, yung mga apprentice niya, panay ganun din yung research. How we can expand computer science or numerical simulation research na diverse, but of course, without losing the impact, without losing the direction. How we can make that diverse. Okay? Another one is communication. And this is one thing I think we can do more. Of course, hindi isang tao ito. Okay? We can have people from development communication, mass communication, com arts to help us. And ang kagandahan din, there could also be communication experts that are very well versed in computational science language. Okay, so how we can improve or move forward in this level sa communicating. Another is interdisciplinarity. I don't need to explain this. If we want to really go beyond the confines of computer science, we go to the social side, it should be interdisciplinary. Sometimes not just interdisciplinary, but transdisciplinary. You cannot anymore dissect the intersections of the disciplines. Another one is economics or finance. Diba? Sometimes our problem, how we can get grant. And usually the grants just come from the government. How can we get grants from the private institutions? How can we make our discipline somehow profitable in the sense that we can use this profit to make more impactful research or studies? So this is one way where your community, our community as computational scientists can help. Okay. Another one is academe, industry, government, civil society partnerships. Usually, when we look at this tri-sector lang, academe, industry, government, sometimes nakakalimutan na rin, we forget the general public, the civil society, the non-government institutions, the funding agencies na foundation, sa foundation galing. Those people who are at the margins, who might be the laggards or left behinds. So we need to include them in our partnerships. Okay, and the importance here is to hear their voices. There are people out there, when we do planning, we don't hear them much. Okay, and another one is futures thinking, futures study. Usually when we do research on this, we just we are very biased on what we have in the present. Although we are always biased because our thinking is, anchored in the present or in the past. But sometimes it's very important to somehow minimize that being anchored in the present and just look at the future? What are the plausible futures? Then you can do foresight generation from present to future, or the other way around, backcasting where you have the desired futures and how you can achieve them, iba-backcast natin. And then we can see there could be many present situations. And we can see if ito yung present natin, ano yung mga missed opportunities natin, sana ganito pala. At least when we marry the foresight, the forecasting and the backcasting, and siguro include natin yung hindcasting, no, ng past, hindsight, we can have a nice pathway or roadmap, or how you can say this, research direction for our, let's say, institution or in your laboratory, in your team. Okay, so futures thinking. And lastly, how can we make more impact? We can have metrics, right, or key performance indicators, but impact can not just be numerical but also qualitative. So how we can really see that we are having impact in our society. So all in all, ito yung I want to suggest when if let's say our community here, our society will do strategic planning, we include of course the theory, the application, and the social side. Okay, and to go deeply with ethics, there are many things that we need to talk about. I'm not going to talk with the details kasi sobrang matagal itong usapan. But for bibigyan ko kayo lang ng keywords. First, transparency. Transparency is being accountable of what we are doing in numerical simulation, being transparent on our methods, being transparent where we get the data, being transparent on the results, on the limitations, being transparent of our biases, being transparent of our conflict of interest. Baka kasi kaya ito yung result natin kasi merong funding agency na nagsabi dapat ganito yung lumabas. So we need to be transparent. But of course, we need to balance that with data privacy. Okay? And another one, we need to balance transparency with security, cybersecurity or government security, yung mga ano natin, baka mamaya ma-hack lang or whatever. Okay? So we need to balance these three. How? It's very difficult. Okay? And another one that we need to include in our ethics discussion is how we can somehow compute. I don't want to say compute because benefit cannot be always quantified, but how we can consider the benefits and the cost, or not just the cost, yung harm, maging harmful sa society, the non-maleficence. Okay, dapat hindi maleficence, hindi harmful sa society. How we can have that? Sometimes we can see numerical simulation reports that could harm our society, especially if that's misinformation or disinformation. Another one, do we need to have codes, ethical codes or standards like what engineers have and the other fields, other disciplines like medicine na meron sila? And how can we assure compliance? How can we assure conformity? But of course, we need to balance that with academic and research freedom. Kasi if you have these code standards, baka mawala yung innovation because we are, putting them in a box. So how we can balance that? So these are the things that we need to consider when we talk about ethics. And lastly, of course, when we do numerical simulation models, simple ba yan? Kaya mo bang i-validate yan? Quote and unquote yung valid, no? Kasi wala naman talagang valid na result because all results are anchored in assumptions and all results can change in the future. Di ba ganyan naman science? In science, the truths that we have now can change in the future. Like, and robustness, how robust, how sensitive yung model natin to small changes. How sensitive or ano yung limitations ng ating model. So we need to always include this in our ethics discussion. And in my experience, halos minsan wala masyadong discussion on this level. Usually data privacy lang, but on the other parts, wala tayong discussion. And this is just second to my last slide, community. So as a society, how we can move forward as a community in the Philippines. if we want to move forward the research natin, we also need to move forward yung ating community. And we always need to think that our community is intergenerational or transgenerational. If we are creating strategic plans now, we need to include yung mga bata. We need to hear their voices. Although sabihin natin na posibleng hindi pa sila ganun ka-matured, but we need to talk to them. Ano yung voice nila? Ano yung gusto nilang mangyari sa future? Because definitely, they are the ones who will handle the future. And in our community, when we do innovation, how agile are we? Okay? Iterative ba ang ginagawa natin, and paano natin ginagawa yung ating innovations? By doing prototypes ba? By doing design thinking? Ano yung quality ng ating innovation, etc. Okay? And then another one is when we do research or when we do numerical simulation algorithms, we always need to think, lalo na if the results have impact to humanity, kaya ba natin i-humanize yon? Okay? We always need to put ourselves, let's say if we want to do a numerical simulation for a certain society, certain community, tingnan natin kung tayo yung nasa community na yon, paano tayo maapektuhan? We need to put ourselves in the shoes of those people. And when we create a community, it should be co-created. It's very difficult to make a community by having just one group and make that top to bottom. Although sometimes it's efficient, but I think for now, to move forward, it should be co-created, because one of the problems that we are having now in organizations is the ownership. People will just think, we don't own this, so hindi ako magiging active. But our members should feel that they are part of the family. And one way here is for them to feel that the plans, the activities are co-created. And of course, definitely we need diverse people because we have diverse needs, but definitely we need to be unified. Okay? And our communities should be resilient, especially in times of disruption, and not just resilience, because resilience is coping back to what we have now. We also need to be anti-fragile. Anti-fragile means if we have problems, if we have challenges, these challenges can make us improve more. Okay? And lastly, if this is a challenge, what is the persona of our community? Ano yung pagkatao ng community natin? And one way is to have a pathway. Ano yung direction natin for the future? And I believe baka later Dr. Chris Monterola will share the AI direction, the AI roadmap of the Philippines that might be very useful if our community will also create our own pathway or our own roadmap. Okay? So to summarize, if we want to have a personality, if we want to be known outside of our field, okay? Of course, computer science, nandiyan na talaga lahat yan eh. Sabi nga kanina, in terms of jobs, tayo yung hinahanap. But as a community, what is our personality? But because definitely there are other organizations, Analytics Association of the Philippines, Mathematical Society of the Philippines, Operations Research Society of the Philippines, maraming societies. How can we have our own personality? And one way is to include tourist application society in our roadmap and look at the future. Ano ba yung desired future natin for us? Okay? And just to share, as my last slides, in UPLB, we are moving forward to this kind of perspective. And we have the UPLB Interdisciplinary Study Centers for Agriculture. And this is nice because ini-embed na talaga namin ang data, science, AI, numerical simulations in agriculture, in environmental, and also in development studies, and very integrated. Okay? And we have one special center, the Computational Interdisciplinary Research Lab, or CINTER Labs, chaired by Professor Jimmy Samaniego. And we are really making this as an integrated part nung mga centers na to. And in the future, siguro within this decade, we will see a new innovation in the university. Sinisimulan na to, the Agrifutura, Agro-Industrial, and IT Park in UPLB. This will be housed near the, kung alam niyo yung dating APEC na now part of the Technology Transfer Office of UPLB. We are going to have this, and we want to really push forward itong agriculture natin sa Philippines, because we know agriculture, of course, also natural resources, forestry, and environmental science can have impact in our societies. So with this, I end my presentation. Thank you very much po.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jomar. It's very interesting to know all of the things that you are doing. And we also agree that we have a lot of challenges ahead of us. And I think CSP is one with you in all of these activities. I think particularly earlier you mentioned about ethics. Incidentally, CSP is also forming a special interest group for artificial intelligence, where we can also discuss these things with regard to research and ethics. I think we have only some time for a few questions. Would you have? Yes, one question that we have right now is if you have any suggestions or tips on how we can successfully collaborate with other researchers in other fields. You mentioned earlier multidisciplinary, transdisciplinary are the way to go forward. Some of our researchers have been working in our own silos. They have started to collaborate with others, but it's very difficult to sustain these collaborations. Maybe you could give your insights on this.
Yeah, there could be many many practices, but based on my experience, one way to really collaborate is to have some kind of relationship with other people, and that could be done if you go outside, you attend conferences, or you play with them. The ComSci people in our university in UPLB and yung tinatawag naming B program, we were able to have this collaboration because we play frisbee, ultimate frisbee. So with this kind of relationships, hindi naman kailangan ganun ka-casual, but we need to go outside. We need to talk to people. We need to be brave enough to talk to them, and siguro after having this kind of casual relationship, pwedeng i-formalize later. But I think that's the first step. We need to go outside. Baka kasi nakaupo tayo lagi sa laptops or sa PC natin.
That's right. So definitely after COVID, we'll try to organize a CSP Frisbee competition so that our researchers get to know each other. Again, thank you very much. We have so many participants right now. We have around 111 participants here in our Zoom call. And thank you very much for all who attended. If you have additional questions for our speakers, please let us know. We will forward them to our speakers and we can answer them afterwards.
Excuse me, Rafi. I think there's one more question in the Q&A chat box. So as you mentioned, let's just forward this question to our speaker, Doc Jomar, in the interest of time. Thank you very much, Rafi.
That's right. All right. Thank you. Before we let Dr. Jomar go, we would like to present the certificate of appreciation to Dr. Jomar Fajardo Rabahante. The certificate of appreciation is awarded to you for your sharing your valuable time and expertise as a research speaker during the Philippine Computing Science Congress held today, May 6, 2021. Signed Dr. Randy Gamboa and Dr. Rachel Edita Rojas for Computing side of the Philippines. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Jomar.
Thank you very much po.
Salamat, Doc Jomar.
We would like to move on to our next speaker. Actually, Dr. Jomar already mentioned her a while ago in his talk. Dr. Angeline Lau is one of the associate professors in the Mathematics and Statistics Department and the Assistant Dean for Research and Advanced Studies of College of Science at De La Salle University. She joined DLSU after the completion of her doctorate degree in systems biology at the University of Rostock, Germany. She held a research fellowship and 2 professional chairs in mathematics, namely the Brother John Lynon FSC professorial chair in mathematics and the Brother Albinus Peter FSC professorial chair in mathematics. Several of her most notable publications include her work on establishing the first mathematical and compartmental models to describe and analyze the influence of the receptor SORLA in the amyloidogenic processing of Alzheimer's disease. Her recent works apply bioinformatics and machine learning approaches to study and discover the patterns in the topological structures of the disease networks and identify biomarkers associated with different diseases. Let us welcome our next speaker, Dr. Angeline Lau. Dr. Angie, you may share your screen now.
Okay.
So we can see your screen. Thank you.
Okay. A pleasant morning to all. Can you hear me?
Yes, you are loud and clear.
Okay, a pleasant morning to all of you. So I'd like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to give a talk at the Philippine Computing Science Congress. So today I would like to share with you our exciting works on reaction network theory and its potential for network topology, analysis, and modeling. So this is the outline of my talk. I will start with some motivation, why we will study and apply reaction network theory, followed by giving a brief introduction about it, and then show how dynamical systems can be converted to reaction network. And lastly, I will present some research studies that apply reaction network theory to analyze dynamical systems. The deterministic and dynamical analysis will be the main motivation for conducting research on reaction network theory. So in a deterministic model and in performing dynamical analysis, these are widely applied in studying biological pathways and systems. For example, in this paper by Kolodenko, this is actually one of the classic paper or one of the pioneer in histology. They showed in this study that the cell fate decisions are often associated with the occurrence of bistability or multistability, where you have the switch in the state of where there is a switch in the given network into a given new state. So, for example, there's a feedback loops that play a major part by causing this oscillation and switch-like transition, and these transition points are actually very important, or these are the major targets of control in oncogenes and tumor suppressor genes. So what is a bistability or multistability? This refers to systems having 2 or more stable states. For instance, given a switch in this given system, a switch is a bistable system that can be in either on an on or off state. And we can actually rank the models according to their abilities to generate both bistability and robustness against parameter variations. The deterministic model allows researchers to predict about the threshold and bistability conditions. And these informations are important or essential if you want to design, for example, therapies that use drugs at their minimal requirement dose, rather than we want to maximize the tolerated dose. So we apply stability analysis to reduce drug dosage without sacrificing the efficacy. However, we know that applying dynamical control or model, this needs extensive experimental support that will constrains the parameter space of your model. This paper by Tyson showed the vector field that points to certain attractors. So that is actually the stable solution of this kinetic equation that we have in this paper. In this illustration or in this figure shown on the slide, the system has 2 stable steady state, or two attractors, which are separated. In the middle, we have the unstable saddle point or a repeller. So attractor of a vector field represent observable physiological states of these biological systems in this paper. So the stable steady states are associated with checkpoints in the cell cycle, and the stable limit cycle that you observe in the illustration is associated with the sustained oscillation of this CDK, or cyclin dependent kinase activity. And even this saddle point that we observe here, it has significant physiological consequence in the cell physiology. In our model of embryonic processing in Alzheimer's disease, we have a set of 16 ordinary differential equations representing proteins and genes in the processing. And we found one biological meaningful equilibrium point by means of linearization, Hartmann-Grobman-Thieren, Routh-Hurwitz test. And we are able to show that this equilibrium point is locally asymptotically stable, and the region of attractor of this equilibrium point was approximated using a fluctuation lemma. But imagine we have 16 ordinary differential equation. Imagine if you have a higher dimension of equation, what will happen, okay, or how complicated or how complex will it be in computing this equilibrium point. And in this paper, we are able to obtain important corollaries that give us temporal behavior of the solutions of the original systems given the initial conditions. For your appreciation, I will show some applications that is applied to computer science. So in this study, the researchers use Lyapunov design method to analyze the nonlinear stability of a generic reservoir computer for some time dynamics. And in their analysis, they were able to predict a certain, I think, efficacy of the actual performance of the reservoir in terms of computed training error. And it's shown in this heat map, the global stability in the reservoir computer's performance. They mentioned that the analysis that is input dependent present some major drawbacks, that the input may not be a priori, and one usually wants this reservoir to be able to process different input signals. And it appears that the training error worsen considerably when a change of the parameter causes loss of this global stability. So some of the limitations of deterministics and dynamic models, these are actually very useful. Network structure are limited in providing mechanistics insights. So the construction of the mechanistics model information about the concentrations and the activities of the components that you included in your network. And this actually changes in response to the perturbation that you move or done in your corresponding systems. Although they are very powerful in simulating and predicting dynamical behavior, this deterministic model usually are confined to including only small number of components. So like what I mentioned earlier, what happens once the systems increase its dimension? So a major limitation is the strong dependency on parameters that often cannot be comprehensively measured and hence need to be estimated. So the limitations that are mentioned earlier can actually be addressed, or we can apply or use reaction network theory as an alternative to address these problems. Chemical reaction network theory, or I will now call it as a reaction network theory from now on, is to draw the connections between graphical structures of a network and the nature of equilibrium states of the corresponding systems of differential equation. So instead of computing the systems of ordinary differential equation, we will use graphical representation, or we'll analyze the topological structure of the topological properties of the networks. I'll now first give a brief introduction of reaction network. And by definition, so please bear with me, by definition, reaction network is a triple sets of species, complexes, and reactions, such that in this reaction network, loops is not allowed, okay? Self loop is not allowed. And if you have a node or a complex, there exists another complex in the complex set such that there is an arc connecting this complex set. And given the reactions represented by y prime, y is your reactant complex and y prime is your product complex. This is an illustration of a reaction network. So this is the reaction network, and the species set is composed of A1, A2, A3, and the complex set is composed of A1 to A2, 2A1 plus A2, A1 plus A2, 2A2, A2, and A3. So these are the nodes. So if you can actually also visualize this in terms of a digraph where your complexes are your vertices or nodes, and the reaction sets will be the arcs connecting the vertices. So this is one reaction, the second reaction, and here we have two more reactions. So all in all, we have 4 reactions. This can be represented in this way or this way. So as I mentioned earlier, you can actually visualize or redefine reaction network using a digraph where you have the complexes as your vertices, and the reactions as your arcs. Here we have some important properties of a given network. So a reaction network is said to have a linkage class if it has a maximal weakly, it is a maximally weakly connected subgraph of its reaction graph. So in the illustration below, this is the whole thing here is the original reaction network that I showed earlier. And these are the respective subgraph that we have in that reaction network. And this subgraph will be the elements of our linkage classes. Okay. And then for strong linkage class, this is a maximal strongly connected subgraph of the reaction graph. That means if you have this as a subgraph, you should be able to start with that given node and go back to that node. And in the given example, this will be our sublinkage classes. So we have 5 sublinkage classes. And for terminal strong linkage class, this is a strong linkage class. So it has to be a strong linkage class containing no complex that reacts to a complex belonging to a different strong linkage class. So these two are not a part of the terminal strong linkage class because, for example, A1 plus 2A2 is a reacts to a complex 2A1 plus A2. Okay. Unlike these two complexes, it doesn't react to another complex. Okay. And then here we define complex vectors. So given the complex set, okay, and the elements or our complexes, we can actually represent them in terms of a complex vector. So A1 plus 2A2 is represented by 1, 2, 0. Okay, because here we have 3 elements. Remember that we have 3 elements in our species set, A1, A2, A3. And we don't have A3 here, so it's 0. Okay, and so on and so forth. We'll use this complex vector later to represent or show or generate our stoichiometric subspace. Okay. So the reaction vector can be computed by the difference between the complex vector of the product minus the complex vector of the reactant Y. Okay. And when you apply the difference, you will generate the sets, okay, of your stoichiometric subspace, and the span of this sets will be your stoichiometric subspace, and the dimension of it will be the rank of your reaction network. So in the given example, this is our reactions, and the span of these reactions is defined by this. Okay, so the difference of the complex reactant, the product complex reactant minus the complex reactant of the complex vector of the reactant and the complex vector of the product. We have this. If you subtract the complex vectors of these two, you'll have this. And note that this can also be represented by this vector representation. Hence, that will be the representation for these two. And then for this reaction, this will be represented by this complex vector, similarly for A2 to A3. Hence, the span of this reaction network, or this is the linear subspace of this reaction network, and the dimension is 2. Okay, the reason why we introduce that is because we want to compute the deficiency of the reaction network. So what is a deficiency? The efficiency of a reaction network is actually a non-negative integer, and this can be associated to the topological property of reaction network. And this number has been the center of many reaction network theory study due to its relevance to the dynamical behavior of the system. So knowing the deficiency, it can tell you the dynamical behavior of a given system. And this can be computed by this formula where n is the number of complexes, or the number of nodes that you have in your digraph. So this is the number of complexes minus the number of linkage classes and minus the rank of the reaction network, S. Okay. So in our given example, the deficiency is equivalent to 1. And what does it mean? So given a deficiency 1, there's a famous theorem in reaction network theory that if the deficiency of a network is 1, it means, or it shows, or it determines that there's existence of rate constants as such that the corresponding differential equations admit multiple possible positive steady states. Okay. So you only need to compute this to know that there exists some rate constant that will give you multiple positive steady states. Okay. Unlike when we do it manually using the differential equation, it will be a very tedious computation. Okay. Now we present how we can convert dynamical systems into reaction networks. So we first define kinetics of the reaction network, okay, by assigning a rate function k sub ij to each reaction's ij, or a while ago it's represented by y prime. Okay. And given that kinetics combining with the reactant complex, a reaction complex, we will be able to set up the dynamical systems. Okay. So given the information we have from the reaction kinetics, we can build the corresponding dynamical systems. And this is an illustration of a systems of ODE. Okay. And how do we convert this to a reaction network? So this converted, given that you take each term of the differential equations, you add the dependent variable x sub I, okay, if the term is positive in the given ODE, and subtract the dependent variable if the term is negative in the given ODE. So this is how we're going to apply the formula to build your reaction network given the dynamical system. Okay, and so for example, we have here x sub 1. So we'll have x sub 1 to x sub 1 as stated here in the illustration. So x sub 1, x sub 1. So now we add x sub 1 because this is positive and this is 0. Okay, so we will add x sub 1 here. Therefore, for this term, the reaction network is represented by x1 to 2x1. Okay, another example, this is x1, x2. So this will be, the product will now be represented as a sum. So we'll have x sub 1 plus x sub 2 in the left-hand side and the right-hand side of the reactions. However, we have here -1 for x sub 1 and 1 for x sub 2. Therefore, we have to subtract x sub 1 and add x sub 2 in the right-hand side of the reactions. And when we subtract x sub 1 and add x sub 2, we'll end up with 2x2. Okay. Hence, this is how it's represented, and so on and so forth. Okay, now we show some applications or how reaction network theory can be useful in studying the dynamical behaviors of some dynamical systems. Okay. In this study, we extended the deficiency 1 algorithm to analyze power law kinetic systems with properties such that the network should impose the properties of reactant determinant interactions. And this is the algorithm that we generated. So the algorithm, we applied that in the reaction network that I showed earlier. Okay? And in applying this, in implementing this algorithm, we're able to show that the system has the capacity for multi-stationarity. We computed earlier that the efficiency is equivalent to 1. Okay? And when we try to validate that, okay, so this is the corresponding differential equations of this reaction network. When we try to validate it, we were able to show that indeed we were able to find, okay, more than one steady state or equilibrium point. Okay. Next one is we apply it to study or to analyze the linear conjugacy of our reaction networks. So two networks are said to be linearly conjugate if the solution of their dynamical equations can be transformed, okay, into each other by a positive linear transformation. So you will see here that there's two plots. One is the original model, and then you can generate another set of differential equations using reaction network that is just a transformation of this original dynamical systems. And we have here in the first row the sparse version of the reaction network. And then here in the second row, we have the denser version of the reaction network, okay, of the original. And this is the algorithm that we also generated to study or to analyze the conjugacy or linear conjugacy of the reaction networks. So in this, so I'll show one example. This is the original reaction network and the corresponding systems of ordinary differential equations. And when we apply the algorithm to generate a sparse version of this reaction network, you'll notice that we have a sparser version of this reaction network. And the sparser version of this reaction network has this corresponding systems of ODEs, okay, which can be simulated or visualized in these simulations. Okay. And then we also use the same algorithm, okay, to generate the dense version, okay, dense reaction network of the original, okay, reaction network. So you'll see that this is now a denser version of the original reaction network. And this is again the corresponding systems of ODE generated, okay, for this denser reaction. And the dynamical behaviors of the denser and sparser reaction network is actually equivalent to the original reaction network or original systems of system model. So that is actually very interesting, especially in generating models for drug design. Okay, so if you, to know how dense or how sparse can your network be in order to simplify or complicate your biological systems. In these two studies, we present novel decomposition classes of reaction networks for S system. Because of course, this decomposition theory can be applied to other type of kinetics, but here we focus on S system. So usually we have gene regulatory network that are studied in terms of module or subnetwork. And these are densely connected subset of nodes that is sparsely linked together and to the remaining other subnetworks. So in the biological system, when you have these modules, these are evident in different biological processes and they have different functional units. So you can define different functional units for these different subnetworks. And these modularity structures may enhance the adaptability and robustness of your biological systems to perturbation. So because you can study them separately in terms of a subnetwork and later on find or generalize what happens if these subnetworks are put together, whether a conclusion you made from the subnetwork, how will that affect, okay, the whole reaction network. So studying the topological features of gene modules or subnetworks and gene regulatory networks and their relationship allows discovery and better understanding, of course, of the complex network. Okay, as shown the studies, those studies presented in the slide. And here in this study, we actually use the gene regulatory network presented by Magod-Bensi and Mulder for TB latency and MTB genes. And we focus on the systems of ODE presented here, or the S systems presented here, is ODE representation of the subnetwork D3. Okay. So we have three subdigraph here, or subdigraph D1, D2, and D3. In this slide, we present the reaction network representation of the subnetwork D3. And this on the right side, we have here the reaction network representation of these dynamical systems. And you can also check the other reaction network representation for the other subnetworks in the paper that we published last year in Philippine Journal of Science. So we have a set of subnetwork, and this set of subnetwork is a network decomposition of the reaction network if the set of reactions of the subnetwork forms a partition of the reaction set. So you can partition the reactions in this reaction set. So you have the R sub I, which is this is a subset of this R. Okay. Then the decomposition of network is said to be independent. So in order to apply this property, okay, the decomposition of a network should be independent. Okay. And if the decomposition of the network is dependent, if the stoichiometric subspace of a network, we can represent them using the direct sum of the stoichiometric subspace. So you can compute the rank of the reaction network, and it's equivalent to the sum of the rank of the subnetworks. Moreover, Boros showed in his study that you can compute the deficiency of the reaction network, okay, as the sum of the deficiency of the subnetworks. Again, if it satisfies the independent property of the network. So as an illustration, we have here the reaction network, okay, N. And then we showed that it can be partitioned into N11, N12, or N21, N22, or N31, N32. So these are the subnetworks, okay? Subnetworks of this given reaction network. So unlike the network decomposition that we see in the second and third column, the network decomposition in the first column satisfies the properties of an independent decomposition. So we see here that the rank of this subnetwork is 2, and the rank of this subnetwork is 1, and the sum is 3, which is equivalent to the rank of the original reaction network. And we also see that this property for deficiency also applies. So the value of doing this is you can now study the subnetwork separately. And you know that when you study the subnetwork separately, and when you put them back together, it still makes sense that it's consistent to the overall conclusion that you will generate from the original reaction network. Okay? And this is useful especially for if you have a very complex model like the one I showed you earlier for the tuberculosis. It's actually very complicated to study the whole complex network, but if you're able to subdivide it into subnetwork and study them separately, that will be easier and more helpful. Here we derive the kinetic systems from the network with independent subnetwork, and this also can be, when we divide the subnetworks, we can actually also partition the kinetic subsystems. So we can also partition the systems K sub I. Okay, And by independent decomposition theory, it states that if X, you are able to find an equilibrium point of a kinetic system, okay, and if you satisfy the independent property of the reaction network, then it must be that this X of this reaction network is also the equilibrium of each kinetic subsystems as represented by this. The sense this shows that if you're able to satisfy this, then the illustration a while ago, the whatever is the equilibrium point for this reaction network, it will also be the equilibrium point for these subnetworks. So that's what it meant. Okay. Next, in this study, the authors showed the genes with high robustness scores are associated with robustness related, such as the slow evolvability, high species broadness, and oncogenes. And robustness can also be determined using reaction network theory. So Shinar and Feinberg introduced absolute concentration robustness as a way to define robustness of equilibrium species concentration in a given dynamical systems. So the aim is to devise a mathematical condition that will ensure robustness, okay, in the function of biological systems being modeled. For example, in this illustration that they showed in their paper, it satisfies the Shinar-Feinberg ACR, or absolute concentration robustness criteria. So this system is robust. However, you'll see that the unique positive steady state applied here, which is this is the unique steady state or equilibrium point, is not an attractor, okay, of this system. None of the cycles that we see here in the figure are attracting to this equilibrium point. Okay, and these systems will genetically fail to converge to this ACR value in either of the coordinates, and thus this is not a good candidate for empirical robustness. Okay. And then in this work, they were able to design a type of control or controller that consists of adding, you may add species and reactions to an existing reaction network, okay, in order to control a target species and make the dynamical systems ACR. Okay. So you can actually add, they have an algorithm how to add the species and reactions to make your dynamical systems absolute concentration robust. So what I have shown so far are the potentials of reaction network in studying and analyzing network topologies and models. And as part of future work, we want to develop more toolbox or to improve existing toolboxes that will incorporate all the algorithms that we have developed so far for reaction network theory. Because currently, these are the main platform to perform reaction network analysis. And these are what we presented are new developments in the fields that have not been integrated in this toolbox or toolboxes. And these toolboxes are currently not being updated. They're already outdated. So they have the classical analyses for the network topology. However, there are a lot of new developments now in reaction networks, and they are not integrated in these two toolboxes. So we showed that reaction network theory is really a relatively new field of studies, and there are so many things that can still be done and discovered. For computer scientists, this can also be part of a research where you can develop more robust algorithm to compute, okay, the network topologies of a reaction network. So the current effort that we have is our initial attempt to create this polyglot that we developed with DLSU's Center for Complexity and Emerging Technologies. It tries to convert the differential equations automatically to reactions network. And this is followed by another attempt that we have, a CRNet translator that we did together with Dr. Solano from UP Manila. Okay, so I'd like to acknowledge the Center for Complexity and Emerging Technologies, Sensor Systems and Computational Biology, and Brother Albinus Peter, FSC, and Brother C. John Lynam, FSC, Professor Chairs in Mathematics. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Angie Lau. And I hope you don't mind if you ask some questions. We have you have a lot of work that has been presented, and we do appreciate all of the work that your team is doing, as well as giving us an update of the developments in your area, particularly in dynamical systems, all the way up to research reaction networks and its applications. We're just curious, maybe you could shed light on if you are doing additional research to help with COVID or vaccines and its applications, probably. Have you started on these kinds of research?
You can actually apply a reaction network to study COVID-related problems, because you can build COVID-related problems using dynamical systems or systems of differential equations using the SIR model and so on and so forth. And then you can study the stability, okay, of these systems using reaction network. And it can be useful in determining, okay, how you can design the strategies in order to ensure the stability of the system or the robustness of your system.
Okay, thank you very much. I do hope we have data that could help us in starting these kinds of work here in the Philippines.
But the beauty of this reaction network is you don't need data, because it's actually parameter free. Okay, so that's the beauty of it. You don't need to estimate or imagine or create, generate your parameters. If you don't have them, you can still perform the analysis and study by studying the topological properties of the network corresponding to the dynamical systems.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure we have a lot of researchers in the room that would be interested to work on this as well. For those who are interested to ask more questions or collaborate, please feel free to use the email address of Dr. Angela. We would like to give thanks to Dr. Angie for presenting her work with us this morning. We have, let me just share this again, this certificate of appreciation for Professor Dr. Angeline Lau for sharing her valuable time and expertise with us as a resource speaker for PCSC 2021. Thank you very much, Dr. Angie Lau.
Thank you.
It's glad to have you with us this morning.
Thank you.
Salamat.
And for our final invited speaker for this morning, may I introduce to you academician Professor Christopher Monterola, who is the head of the Asian Institute of Management's Aboitiz School of Innovation, Technology, and Entrepreneurship, or ASITE, the Executive Managing Director of the Analytics, Computing, and Complex Systems Laboratory. He's also holder of the Aboitiz Professoral Chair in Data Science and the Academic Program Director of the newly launched Doctor of Philosophy in Data Science program of AIM. It is the first and only PhD in Data Science program in the Philippines and among the few in Asia. He has recently conferred the rank academician by the National Academy of Science and Technology, the highest recognition and scientific advisory body of the Philippines under the Department of Science and Technology. Dr. Monterola is a well-published scientist. In recent years, he has published in some of the most prestigious journals in complex systems, AI, transportation, aging, demographics, and basic research. On top of the academic publications, Dr. Monterola has led multi-million-dollar research and development projects with various sectors of the society. He has also been responsible for training and mentoring young scientists and data scientists on an international level. Please help me welcome Professor Chris Monterola.
Thank you so much, Rafi. Can you hear me, my voice? Is my voice loud and clear?
Loud and clear.
Good. Okay, thank you. And that photo was taken 15 years ago. So my apologies if you're not happy with what you're seeing right now. So again, good morning, everyone, and allow me to share my screen. Can you confirm that you are seeing the, is it in a full screen mode?
We are seeing the presenter view.
Okay.
There
How
you go.
about now? Okay,
Yes.
okay, thank you so much. And I changed a little my slide because of what Dr. Rojas mentioned in her introduction. So I will be focusing more on what are the possible opportunities for the people in the crowd right now in the field of data science specifically. But still, majority of my presentation will be based on some of the works that we've done with industry and government agencies in the Philippine context. So my presentation will follow the following outline. First, a very brief introduction about Industry 4.0 and the science of data. This is how I define data science, trying to understand the science of data. Majority of my presentation will be on data science applications and government in industries. In the process, I hope you will have an idea of how it is like to work with the government and industry sector, especially here in the country. And then third, this has been my advocacy for a long time now, finding, creating, or putting some business acumen to the technical guys like you know, computer science. As you all know, this is as Rachel mentioned, this is one of the most important field right now, your field. And I will give you some ideas on how you can potentially multiply by a factor of 3 your salary if you have some level of business acumen. And how finally, I will close my presentation by providing you some short notes on how education can be redefined by these initiatives in data science. So yeah, one of the biggest disruptor currently of in your generation is the so-called Industry 4.0 that focuses on technology, specifically artificial intelligence. These are some of the important technological trends that we are seeing right now. Okay, first off, we talk of smart devices. We talk of smart devices. And as a result of these smart devices, so smart cities, smart sensors, smart cars, we are producing a lot of data. So we probably have seen how much data we are producing, but yeah, even now, I'm still amazed how many tweets we are sending in 1 second, no? More than 9,000. How many emails we are sending in 1 second? More than 3 million. In fact, the total amount of emails being sent in 1 day totals to, here's the number on the right-hand side, 129 billion, which is about 18 times greater than the population of this planet. Of course, a good portion of them are spam mails. And unlike in the previous era, prior to Industry 4.0, where most of the energy are consumed by mechanical devices, by creating movement or motion, right now, a good portion of the energy that we are spending is actually in developing or creating information. In 1 day, about 2.1 million smartphones will be sold. And this is the total number of electricity and carbon dioxide emissions as a result of getting data or creating information. So we are producing a lot of information. That is the point. And I'm sure most of you have heard this. 90% of the data that we have generated in this since the start of human civilization, we have generated that in the last 2 to 3 years. Or roughly translated, it means every 2 to 3 years, we are generating about 9 to 10 times more data. That means in 4 to 6 years, we will be generating 100 times more data compared to the total data that we have right now. So this combination of having all this data plus the fact that we can now store that data. So I'm in the panelist view right now, and I'm looking at the individuals here. Most of the individuals here are familiar with the different devices here that we have here. And in our college years, we are still using that 1-port floppy disk that can only store up to 1.4 megabytes. Not even sufficient to store one high resolution photo. Now we can, it is common now to see 2 terabyte USB. And if you look at the prices of how expensive it is to actually store information now, from a high of in 1970s, 1 megabyte of data is 1 million USD. So Rafi, if you will go back in time, okay, bring your USB and you'll know that you'll be a millionaire. Now the price of this is just 10 to the negative 5 USD. It's really peanuts. And computing power, this is the first supercomputer, no? Created by IBM. It's quite fast. No? It can do 5,000 instructions per second. Weight is 30 tons. Cost is 6 million. And the size, bigger than that of a bus. Now, this is an older version of iPhone. And it can do 25 billion instructions per second at more than 100,000 times cheaper price that is cheaper than the initial cost. So this is actually the reason why we have the so-called Industry 4.0. This is one of the main driver of the so-called Industry 4.0. A lot of data. This data can be stored, can be crunched by a powerful computer, and that innovation is not just happening, it is accelerating. New paradigms are being developed, new business models are being created, and exactly this is the reason why it becomes disruption in various forms. It's becoming exponentially increasing. In 1937, a lifespan of S&P 500 companies in the US, these are the top 500 companies in the US in terms of market capitalization, is up to 61 years. But now it is just 12 to 15 years. What is the implication of this? Most of you will be working, most of us will be working for more than 40 years. And it implies that because of this increasing disruption, you have to look for 3 to 4 jobs in your lifespan. Not 3 to 4 jobs, not because you want to, but because you need to, because companies are dying, okay? Many companies are being disrupted. And one of the biggest disruption, as I mentioned, is the artificial intelligence. Okay, in 5 years' time, they are expecting that the impacts on offerings of artificial intelligence will be more than 60%, and they keep on increasing this. That the most recent number is about 93%. In the next 5 years, there is an expectation that new business value will evolve because of the use of AI. And therefore, artificial intelligence is not just a technology. It is a strategic capability for most companies. Okay, it's a strategic capability that allows them to innovate and scale up. And for governments, it is now referred to as a nation-defining component. So here I'm just giving you the ABCs of disruption. No? Artificial intelligence, blockchain technology, cloud computing, everything as Rachel mentioned, as Dr. Rachel mentioned in her opening remarks, these are all related to your field right now. 72%, more than 70% of that will be contributed by artificial intelligence. And the expectations is really high. No, it could add up to $15.7 trillion the global economy by 2030. But I guess the more important number here is that in the Philippine context, even without changing what we are doing right now, just looking at the technology, the companies that we have right now, if we properly at least hit some threshold, it can add 92 billion US dollar uplift to the Philippine economy. What does it mean? It means 20% improvement in the GDP, which roughly translates to 20% improvement in the average income of the Filipino people, working Filipino people. I cannot think of anything right now where artificial intelligence is not being used. No, in fact, yesterday we launched the first the Philippine Artificial Intelligence Roadmap, and the main reason why this has to be done is while in the past we imagined that oil and the strength of the army are the nation-defining capability. In this era, governments around the world look at AI as a nation-defining capability. And why is this important to you right now? The reason for that is because main idea here is that we are one of the top first 50 countries where we have actually tell the world that we are working on an AI strategy landscape. So as early as November 2019, we have discussed and gave some presentations to our international counterpart on what we are doing on in this part of the world when it comes to artificial intelligence. And hopefully in another venue, we will be happy to discuss this idea of AI roadmap. And this is important to you. No? This is not a work by just one individual. It's a collaboration. We have intimately discussed this with the individuals here and many more. No? And almost all the government agencies, their secretaries, their undersecretaries, to come up with this idea. And one of the core of this roadmap is the creation of a national center for AI research, which will be housing full-time scientists, where we imagine, and this will be led, one of the difference of this is that this will be led by a private enterprise. Money will be coming from private enterprise, so it will be supported by government. But by doing so, we can be autonomous from the government, and therefore, the salary of the full-time scientists that we are imagining here should be comparable to their value, especially data scientists globally. So this is getting some support, and one of the dream of this roadmap is that we will be able to attract these different companies to create a base here in the Philippines, especially on the R&D context. Specifically, we have Unilever here, of course. We have Fujitsu, we have Microsoft, we have Google, but most of these companies set up shop here simply because of our marketing component, not really because of the R&D. We would like them to set up an R&D hub here in the country. So anyway, with that, I will now go to the essence of my talk, no? Data science application and government and industry. As again, one of the things that I would like you to have a takeaway in my presentation today is that technology is there. Now, digital transformation, we refer to this as this digital transformation, and technology is really the driver of innovation. But if you want to really be an innovative company, or if you really want to create this innovation and operationalize it, the one that is most critical is having an entrepreneurial mindset. If we look at the most innovative companies in the world, the so-called Gandalf, Google, Amazon, Netflix, DBS, Apple, LinkedIn, and Facebook, you will see that almost all these companies are led by visionaries with a very good understanding on the science of data, make use of data. No, a good portion of them are actually computer scientists. But one thing that differentiate them from the usual STEM grads is that they have that entrepreneurial mindset. No, entrepreneurial mindset. So Page and Brin, now one of the Bezos, Hastings, they have that entrepreneurial mindset aside from their very strong background in computer science, in mathematics, in physics, and engineering. And this is just an interesting data. I really want this you to understand this, that the data scientists in the Philippines since October 2020, based on payscale.com, now earns more than doctors and lawyers. This is the first time, no, that somebody from the STEM grads will actually earn more than the usual profession in the country, which is doctor and lawyers. And this just keeps on improving. And the reason for that, allow me to demonstrate in the next examples. Now, this is a work that we've done with Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, as you know, regulates more than 50 institutions. 500 financial institutions, and every month, okay, they will be spending 40 man-hours per institution, because every financial detail will have thousands of entries. So what we have demonstrated here is that if you use artificial intelligence, combined it with the network science, of course, discussing this closely with domain experts, that 20,000 man-hours can be reduced to just 11 minutes. This is the power of artificial intelligence. Now, this is the power of using computational methods. Another example, I think you've seen some of this, maybe some of you have heard about some of the news about this in the last few months, trying to forecast Angat Dam water level. No? Before, they can do this prediction up to 2 weeks, but with using deep learning, using LSTM, we were able to increase this forecast up to 6 months with the same level of accuracy. And there's a big difference between 2 weeks and 6 months, because in 6 months' time, you can do intervention, you can plan ahead. And that is very critical, okay, especially in this context. Just to demonstrate to you this one, okay, the system that we have initially deployed to Manila Water, for example, gives you, this is 1 year after deployment, the dashed lines there is actually the water at our prediction, and the solid line is the water level prediction. No? Sorry, the solid line is the actual water level. Magic number here is 180 to 200 10 meters. If the water level is higher than that, and there is a lot of, say for example, typhoons and rainfall, it can cause flash floods, killing lives. But if it's too less than that, okay, and there is no rainfall, it can cause water shortage. So we need to understand and forecast this quite well. And we would like, one of the project now is actually to do this to almost all the water reservoir in the country. This is an example of a work that we have done with SMEs, no? Small, medium enterprises. We are looking at what are the things that they need to place in the store and what are the things that they need to buy, because there is a lag between the consumption, the demand, and the purchase of an item. So we help them in forecasting what are the important what are the important units that they should buy and where should they be placing that in their store. No? So this is again another example of the use of artificial intelligence and computing science in industries. This is a work that in general is quite straightforward. No? This is on agriculture. This is one of the bigger agriculture company in the country. They have a presence over 60 territories and they have more than 300 products, feeds, and different animal supplements. And by simply understanding properly the demand and supply for the different territory, we were able to help them save 100 million due to spoilage. So more than 100 million, $2.5 million. So that's around 150 million pesos. No? And the great one of the biggest reason for their revenue loss is because of the spoilage. So this is another example that we have introduced in the data science program at AIM. Companies actually pay us up to normally $10,000 so that they will be part of our capstone projects. This is a drastic discount compared to the amount that we are charging if we will be working with the company for 6 months. So these are just some of the projects that our students have done, from electricity demand forecasting, working with a company. Company again needs to pay $10,000 to become part of this, and this is doable. And we were able to give $10 million annual increase in revenue of our partners, and this number were not given by our students. These numbers were given by the CFO, mostly the CFO of the different companies that we've worked with. Because of the success of such, in the next batch, there are more companies who've been approaching us. And in fact, we have completed, because we only have 15 groups, we have completed 15 projects. And these are just some of the companies that we've worked with in last year during the pandemic. And we were able to increase their annual revenue by a fourfold compared to the first batch. And currently, we have another 15 groups, but a good portion of those groups actually are in the field of education. I will say 4 to 6 of the groups are in the field of education. So another example, this is one of the company that we really would like to help in the country, manufacturing. So this is one of the MNCs in the Philippines, and we know that manufacturing is a cutthroat industry, which means it's a global competition. You cannot just compete locally or else you will die. And we have lost a lot of manufacturing companies because we cannot compete on R&D. Because at the core of manufacturing really is R&D, process improvement, process efficiency. So in this one of the MNCs that we've worked with, and they are supplying more than 90% of one very specific device globally, okay, by properly understanding machine and human interface, their machines can cost up to $500,000. Okay, we can lessen the disruption. And per product, we can save them 7.5 million up to 75 million for 10 products. And they have hundreds of products, but we have only tested this for some number of products. Or in healthcare, no, one of the main concern right now, and in fact, that one of the interesting findings recently is that for some reason, the total number of cases reported is decreasing, but the hospital capacity seems not to be increasing. So in this project that we've done with one of the leading pharmaceutical company in Asia, and they are ASEAN, and they have several hospitals, by simply looking at the initial conditions of the patients, we can predict how long will they be staying in the hospital. Okay, by doing so, we can actually plan the resources of your hospital on whether to admit this patient or not, or give them to another set of hospitals. And yeah, these are just some interesting things about artificial intelligence. No, it can be used in transforming creativity in education. So I saw that in the session this afternoon, there are a lot of AI talks. So I guess the community is very familiar with GANs, for example, and natural colorization. If you're not aware, one of the highest paid job in the Philippines are being colorizer. That is the term. They're Filipinos artists colorizing Marvel or DC comics. Now you can do this almost automatically. Not just that, but also videos. No. And same as the presentation of Angelina, of course, you can do artificial intelligence in drug discovery. So in this particular example, we try to understand what are the core regulatory genes that if you create a drug that targets those core regulatory genes, you will be able to improve the immune system of an individual. So we have produced 3 patents as a result of the different works that are being shown here. Of course, the patents are different from this work, but they are related to the works that we are being shown here. One of the interesting takeaway also that we have seen in this work is that Asian samples are drastically different from that of Caucasian samples, where most of the studies on aging is based. And thus, as a result, I expect that this will have some results on the vaccines that we are getting, because most of those tested are actually not Asian samples. And probably that is also the reason why, for some reason right now, Sinovac seems to be better than AstraZeneca, because Sinovac are tested actually, or the initial testing are actually with Asian samples. And last, okay, this is my last example. Time check. Okay, this is my last example. And I go on this very quickly. We look at the effects of Industry 4.0 to Filipino workers. And I note that Dr. Rachel and Chari here are experts in natural language processing. This is our contribution to that literature. The effect of automation to Filipino workers. No? So there's an article by Prey and Osborne that somehow summarizes the chance of the different jobs being automated. And what we have done is to translate this into Philippine context. No, there are all the jobs that is listed in the Philippine context can be seen in the Family Income and Expenditure Survey, about 408 of them. And if you look at the number of jobs that is available in the work of Prey and Osborne, are 702 and a 41,000 variation. And if you try to just simply compare and contrast them, there are about 11 billion combinations. So this is humanly impossible to manually match. So we use natural language processing to match this job, and then at the same time, therefore, understand what is the chance that the jobs in the Philippines will be automated. And here are the results. No, I will not discuss the detail, but here are the results. 78% of our workforce has a 50% chance of being automated. This is the entire workforce of the Philippines right now. And in terms of gender, male jobs, actually males are more prone to automation than female. Okay, female workers are less susceptible to automation. In terms of the region, okay, the general result here is that a region with lower GDP is more prone to automation. And in terms of age, those who are older are less prone to automation, which is an interesting finding. No, because our older folks like me, we are less. We cannot be automated compared to younger individuals like Jomar or Angeline, for example. Economic indicators. Again, the sad news here is that the lower your salary is, the higher is the chance that you will be automated. Okay, and similarly with educational achievement, if you don't finish college, if you're elementary education, there is a 50% chance that you can be more automated than that who finish college or even higher degrees. So the bad news is that in general, vulnerable segments are more vulnerable due to Industry 4.0. That is the result that we got here. And using AI and artificial network science at this point in time, Okay, the next thing that we ask ourselves is whether we can determine what are the skill sets that if we incorporate that in our K to 12 curriculum and in, for example, in college, we will be able to improve the chance that our individuals will not be automated and we will be able to create higher income jobs. Okay, I will not go into the detail, but this is a network science approach. You can do community detection. The red ones here are the jobs that can easily be automated. And the blue ones here are the jobs that are resilient to automation. We can exactly understand what it takes for one to shift or go from one job to another job. No, upskill and reskill. We can do that. Okay, we can do that. I will not discuss the detail, but the main idea here is that if we properly try to understand this, okay, it is possible for us if we will just upskill our graduates with the top 25 abilities that we have listed here, we can increase the number of workers that will be below the poverty threshold, and their annual salary can be increased from 180,000, this is the current annual salary of our workers, to 235,000 after. Okay, so again, those are some of the policy perspectives when it comes to using AI in government and industries. So in the next 5 minutes, okay, let me now give a presentation on the institutions that I am part of, and this is one of my advocacy. I'm part of a school where the goal is to actually build a community of geeks, data scientists such as you and me, innovators, entrepreneurs. We are housing some of the top entrepreneurs in the country. They are going to school and they're enrolling their business. And we have, as mentioned by Rafi, we have the PhD in data science program. So community of innovators, technologists, and entrepreneurs. And we are happy that the reason why our name starts with Aboitis is because we got a $10 million Aboitis donation. And a good portion of this donation will go to give scholarships to highly talented STEM graduates. No? Those who would like to pursue data science, those who would like to pursue innovation. And this is just from one laboratory at the National Institute of Physics. These are geeks like you and me long time ago. No? And somehow we were able to engage them at AIM. Currently, a good portion of them are still with AIM. Some we have spin out to industries. And we were able to increase their salary by several fold because, again, the most important thing that I would like to mention here is aside from their national typical technical talent, we have to add their entrepreneurial skill set and business acumen. The ability to talk to people in the boardroom. That is the idea. These are just some of the entrepreneurs in the AI produced by AIM. You can see that almost all the brands that you've been seeing in the malls, these are a good portion of them have scaled up their business as well, being part of AIM. And we're getting a lot of sponsors because of this initiative. So a good portion of our students, more than 25% of them, are sponsored by various industries and companies. We accept them in the program and then they sponsor them after such. One of the most important thing that we bought immediately is a supercomputer. Or actually, we got immediately. This is a donation from the Stanshi Group. Stanshi is the owner and founder of Acer. So 1.2 petabytes. No, it's not petabytes. Petaflops. Sorry, supercomputer. And I like this photo because you can see here geeks working with the Mancom of Ayala, arguably one of the biggest conglomerate in the country. And you are seeing here the geeks. My back is now the current BPI president. You can see their JASA, you can see their Ernest Co of Globe, the head of IMI, Arthur Tan, and all the business units head. No? And during this time, they are listening to the promise of data science in digital transformation, one of the projects that we have completed with the Ayala Group. Almost all the individuals here, aside from the geeks, are probably among the top 50 taxpayers in the country. So last note, no, I think this is one very important thing that will actually change many of the. Well, I will definitely will improve your chance of getting, I will say, better salary, better life. Okay, innovation, data science, and entrepreneurship are best taught by those who actually experience it. Unfortunately, this is not the profile of our higher education teacher. I've taught in UP for more than 15 years, and definitely this is not my profile then. No, this is not my profile then. That is why if you are a STEM grads in an employer survey, these are mainly the problems of STEM grads: the business sense, real world analysis and decision making, knowing that the horse is not a spear. You cannot approximate the horse as a spear. Compelling communication skills and ability to do teamwork and people skills. So one of my challenge to most of you is actually try to have these skills. Try to read more about how do you create business value to the many of the technical things that you're doing. And there is a very compelling story that I would like to tell you, but because if you do that, okay, STEM grads who go into our program increase their salary by up to 3.5 pre-pandemic and a factor of 2 immediately after completing their degree programs because of their ability to now understand and anchor themselves to business value rather than their technical competency. Okay, with that, again, thank you for the invitation, especially thank you to Henry Adorna for his invitation, and Rafi, again, thank you for your very generous introduction.
Thank you very much, Professor Chris. There are so many things that you shared with us this morning, and we are happy and excited to hear all of the developments for data science and AI for the country. These are really exciting times, especially that we see that data science and AI can really help solve the problems of the country. If you don't mind us tinkering or talking about this a little bit further, could you shed some light on what we should expect for the short term, maybe this year or 2022, for any kind of big news or big plans for AI and data science?
Well, for AI and data science, this is getting a lot of traction, and the AI roadmap, the NCARE, for example, I'm happy to say that I'm quite confident that we will get a lot of buy-ins from private organizations to have this, and the idea is that it can employ up to maybe 50 full-time scientists. 50 full-time scientists, and the salary of this, I will have my way, will be in dollars, I hope. No, it is autonomous. We have to make it autonomous to the Philippine government. Otherwise, we will be under the salary in the standardization law, and we cannot compete globally to the talent pool that we have to produce. And the idea is that the reason why we can have that, and one of the things that we would like to demonstrate, is that there's an ROI, a return of investment. And that these companies, maybe, I don't know, but again, the idea here is the focus is really on socioeconomic needs and making sure that the companies here in the Philippines will be very competitive with respect to the rest of the world. But that's number one. No? That's number one. And yes, I hope that will happen soon. I really hope that can happen soon, and I'm excited to have this, because I can tell you, Raf, that it is not just me who are excited about this, but also the secretaries of the current administration.
Yes.
It's a good branding for the Philippines at the same time.
Yes, definitely. And we are also excited here in CSP to work together with you and the others for moving this forward. I think we have a question from Doc Rachel. Doc Rachel.
Doc Rachel.
Thank you, Rafi. Thank you, Dr. Chris, for the very interesting presentation. In relation to the idea that was raised yesterday in the launching of the AI roadmap, Dr. Tirso from the State University Association, he mentioned that currently we have higher education institutions who are sort of leading, or they are strong in AI and data science, and we can actually exploit on this. So can you please comment on how, for example, CSP and the members of our organization can do something so that we can contribute to the fulfillment of the AI roadmap and the targets? Thank you.
Thank you, Ma'am Rachel. Actually, there are many ways. And yes, you're right. Now, one of the dimension of the roadmap is really on creating talents, creating talent pools. And there is a big role that should be filled by the different AI organizations. This will be a national effort, but and yes, the idea is that hopefully that end care, as a result of the presence of that end care, we will be producing a lot of works, research works, and I will be happy to share with everyone the AI roadmap the moment that we get clearance from DTI, and you will see there that indeed one of the strategic tasks is actually to link this center with all the higher institutions in different regions. The OST have actually different innovation center across all the country, and we have identified also all the different centers of excellence that can potentially be we can potentially use this. The idea of this center is actually it will serve as an efficient and interface to the industry and all these other centers. Give them a proper context, give them a proper perspective on how businesses thinks of a problem specifically. No, because the note that AI, artificial intelligence, specifically, this is a type of application where it is a type of science where the applications is ahead of the fundamentals, way ahead of the fundamentals. And exactly this is the reason why a good portion of the development in this field, most of the leading experts, they are associated with industries, or even a good portion of them were even part of Google, Facebook, etc. So we want that, and I think it's a natural fit for that context. Second point, ma'am, and this is why we started stimulating the country with this PhD in data science program. Data science is one of the very few degrees where completing it is useful for both industries and the academic. It's one of the very few where if you complete this degree, it is useful for both the academic community, because in a sense, data science is a research problem. It's a research field. A good data scientist is a good researcher. So there is that alignment. And lastly, let me mention this. One of the goal here is to increase the GDP spending in R&D of the Philippines. Right now, we are spending only 0.16% of our GDP for R&D. The suggested spending should be 2 to 4% of the GDP. But now we have to justify this spending by mentioning that if we spend the GDP, there should be a return immediately and in the long run, because there's a hierarchy of needs. People are suffering. We need to produce jobs. We need to create income, and I believe that this will be a good balance to transition to that improvement in the GDP, focusing on AI research, focusing on data science, not just AI but data science as a whole. Thank you, ma'am. I hope I was able to answer your question.
Thank you. That question is in relation to what you mentioned, that we need capacity building because
yep,
we
definitely
have limited experience by our faculty members. So the immediate thing would be, okay, how do we capacitate the members of our organization to be able to help our respective institutions?
Yun po yung goal. We imagine to have some sort of a council of mentors specifically to expose everyone to what is the idea of being in the industry. Magaling po ang academic institution kasi na maggawa uli ng teacher. Kasi yun ang training natin mga teachers tayo, mga educators tayo. But to create individuals who will be leaders in the industry, etc., yun yung medyo kulang. So ang isa pong hope namin dito with it will not just be data scientists, it will be supported by the industries. Ilalagay natin yung perspective po na yon, and we will engage as many possible na nasa academe, nasa higher institutions about this perspective. Paano po yung maging innovators, paano po mag-work with industries.
Yeah. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you po, ma'am.
Thank you, Doc Rachel, for the questions. And I think that's all the time that we have for this morning.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you very much, Professor Chris. And we would like to present this certificate. So on behalf of CSP, we would greatly appreciate your time and effort for sharing your expertise with us this morning.
Thank you. My pleasure,
Again,
my
thank you
pleasure, Computing Society of the Philippines. Thank you po.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
And that ends our morning session for the 3 plenary sessions and invited talks. In a few minutes, we will have the business meeting for CSP. So please join us in this meeting for those who are members of CSP. We have Doc Randy. I'd like to turn over the floor to you.
Yes, Doc Rafi, I think we can start with the CSP business meeting immediately. I think Doc Rachel is already ready. Doc Rachel, can we start now? I mean, in the interest of time, it's almost 11:30. We're
Yes.
supposed to have an hour business meeting. So hopefully we can end this one before 12:30 or before 12 o'clock if possible, no? So that we can have enough time also to have our lunch and we can proceed with the next session this afternoon. Ma'am
Okay.
Rachel?
Thank you, Dr. Randy. Okay, so for the business meeting, we would like to welcome the members. So if you are a member of the Computing Society of the Philippines, kindly stay behind. The program resumes at 1 o'clock, Dr. Randy.
1:30 ano, Doc
1:30.
Rachel?
1:30. Okay. Please come back at 1:30 for the rest of the presentations. But for the members, please stay behind. Okay. So we'd like to thank the members of the board. These are the elected members of the board in the positions. So thank you very much for the hard work during the past year. And we have chairs of the special interest groups on NLP, the SPICE, Mathematical Foundations of Computer Science, Women in Computing, and the newly formed AI Special Interest Group. And of course, thank you, Alfred, for the hard work, our CSP Secretariat. Okay, so organizational issues, this will be the parts of our business meeting, things that we have done for research, capacity building, and then the election and referendum on the revisions of our constitution and other matters if there are any. So as mentioned, we have special interest groups, SPICE, the Mathematical Foundations of Computer Science, and these are the chairs. Okay, NLP, Women in Computing, and the newly formed Special Interest Group in AI. And we have committees, the membership and the research committee. So make sure that you are active in any of these or at least one, and then be a member of a committee. Now for the journals, maybe our editors can provide a report later. So we have 2 journals of CSP. We have the Philippine Computing Journal, the PCJ. We are happy to report that it is already in the ASEAN Citation Index. And we have the Philippine IT Journal, PITJ. Our editors are Dr. Marie Neri and Dr. Greg Victor Cabison, respectively. And then for the capacity building for the past year, we have had seminars on the COVID series. And then we had a research paper writing seminar, aside from the activities of the special interest groups. And then for the election, there will be 3 board members who will be outgoing. So we need to elect 3 new board members. And we are proposing revisions to our constitution and bylaws. So we need to make a referendum. This will be handled by the COMELEC of CSP. So that will be my report, the president's report. Would the editors have anything to say about the journals?
I can come in after Marek. Okay. Good morning to everyone.
Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So as Dr. Rachel Rojas has stated earlier, the Computing Society of the Philippines is publishing the Philippine Computing Journal. So it is this is our latest issue for August 2020. This journal is a peer-reviewed publication committed to original high-quality papers on computing. So if you have research in mathematical computing, also in artificial intelligence, theoretical features or concepts, and also some numerical simulations. To name a few, we are welcoming articles on these topics. So this is listed with the ASEAN Citation Index, and the Philippine Computing Journal is published by the Computing Society of the Philippines since 2005. So we are now, this year we will be having our volume 16 of the